What he's left with is a Ange Postecoglou style squad. The goalkeeper can't kick it in a straight line. And Romero, Porro, Destiny Udogie, Richarlison, they all love chaos.
Tottenham Hotspur are in absolute turmoil. One Premier League win from their last 8 games, 13th place in the league and just 9 points above the relegation zone. My beloved West Ham, in fact. For them, Tottenham Hotspur are the silver lining to our dark cloud. However, this season, for SunSport's very own tactical guru and Tottenham Hotspur fan, Dean Scoggins, it's very much a dark cloud indeed. This is Tactics Exposed Team Talk. I'm Will Pugh, and we will, of course, be answering 3 questions from you guys about, now normally we do the big game at the weekend. Tottenham have got Palace. We'll talk about that a bit, but Dino, we're going to focus a little bit more on what Thomas Frank has to do in this game and beyond in order to save his job.
Yeah, let's be frank. It's not been very good, has it? Let's be honest. And you know me, as much as I support the team, I'm not a booer, but I'm not one who dances at a 1-0 home win against Burnley either. So, let's straight down the line. So far for Tottenham, it's not been good enough.
No. Long-term, stable philosophy. Finally, that's what Tottenham Hotspurs have got, is what I was hearing from an awful lot of the Tottenham fans I know when Thomas Frank got appointed. It's fair to say, I think you were quite confident too. Just hasn't worked out, has it?
No, I mean, yeah, long-term philosophy I can buy into. You know, we're going to put a plan in place to do that, but they've still got a core of a team who finished 17th in the Premier League last year. And so far, Frank hasn't shown enough to change things around. So, hence why 13th and struggling.
Well, as I said, this video is going to answer what Thomas Frank has to do to save his job. Presumably, Dino, you don't think it's too late for him. Otherwise, it's a bit of a waste of an episode.
Yeah, let's have a look, shall we?
Exactly. Right, let's go to question number 1 then, Dino. Well, there we go. Took the words out of my mouth. Is it already time to sack Thomas Frank? Once again, I hope the answer to this is no. Otherwise, the next 2 questions, a bit of a waste of time.
Well, if I'm wearing my fan's hat, yes, it is time to sack Thomas Frank, to be quite honest. But I don't like it. I don't like, snap judgments and snap decisions. And we have seen some positivity in there. The Super Cup game against PSG played really, really well. Won at Man City away after beating Burnley first game of the season with a really clear, excellent tactical plan. And we're all standing there going, this is amazing. It's not Ange ball, it's adaptable. It's all of that stuff that goes with it. But now it's become confused, slow, turgid, and he doesn't know his best team. So that's a big, big problem.
Right. Show me on the tactics board then, Dino. What's happening and what should be happening? What's he trying to do? What are you actually seeing?
Well, one of the major issues that they've got is how disconnected they are as a team. And when Ange Postecoglou took us to the Europa League final last year and then obviously won it, in the games that they played well, there was this definite connection in the team. So we talked about this a lot on Tactics Exposed, where we had like 3 players working together. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the same on this side, 3 players working together. And just to go back into that shape that Thomas Frank is employing, that they're often playing with 2 deep midfielders here. They're playing with somebody off the left who isn't a left winger. In a lot of games, it's been Xavi Simons normally being there. It's been Lucas Bergvall in a couple of games. And what is happening is that Tottenham are becoming lopsided. Now, we talk about this with teams like Arsenal as well, where they prefer to attack down one side. This is not a preference of attacking down one side. This is the fact that they're only set up to attack down one side. So if Richarlison or Kolo Muani is going over as you would, because if Kudus has the ball over here, then obviously your number 10, which has been Xavi Simons in recent weeks, but he'll be suspended this weekend. And then obviously you've got Pedro Porro, who would join in the attack. And then they've been playing with this very, very solid group here. And then they've got a right-footed left-back in Jed Spence, who doesn't like going up the left. Lucas Bergvall, a natural central midfield player / number 10, has been playing. So Spurs go in there. So what do opposition teams do? They go like that. completely block that corridor, and then look how easy it is for them to get out the other way. And when Spurs do manipulate possession going across field, move it into a number 10, move it across midfield, and then by the time it gets over here, 1 pass, 2 pass, 3 pass, 4 pass to come over this side, you've got Jed Spence, who, as good an athlete as he is, and as good a defender as he is playing against 2 players as a right-footed left-back. And so the attack is completely disjointed. And to be quite honest, it doesn't look like they have got any attacking structure or plan about them whatsoever.
But that simply can't be true, right, Dino? Because lots of people say about Thomas Frank, they were really impressed with the tactical prowess he showed at Brentford. I will just say it's one of those opportunities. I always feel with managers who leave Brighton and Brentford that those are 2 clubs who are so well run, they often make managers look better than they are. I felt a little bit like that with Thomas Frank, but you were singing his tactical praises quite a lot at the beginning, particularly after those 2 performances you've meant. What is he trying to do here? What's going on? You must be able to know what he's trying to do, even if it is going quite badly.
Well, defensively, in organisational setup, they've been much better.
Right.
He has solved some of those Ange Postecoglou issues around shape. So obviously, with 2 proper fullbacks and 2 holding midfield players like they've got, he has formed a much better structure. Under Postecoglou, you might find a left back up there, a centre midfielder over there, and a right back over there in a defensive structure that looks all over the place. So straight away, he's got that more secure, but their conversion from defence to attack is just not there.
Is there anything in it, Dino, that the expectations at Brentford were a lot different? He sort of had the freedom, if you like, to be a lot more defensive and organised in a lot more games without getting too much grief from the fans because the whole sort of ambition of the club was smaller. Is there an element that maybe he just hasn't had to, albeit by the period in the Championship, he hasn't had to be the team on the front foot, and perhaps there's a bit of a gap in his tactical knowledge?
So that's interesting, that, because against a lot of teams at Brentford, he had high levels of possession. They were quite high up the possession table when there were games against mid to low table teams. So they didn't just play one way. They played a counter-attacking style and high pressing at times against teams at the top of the table. And then they retreated in when they lost possession. And then when they played teams in the middle or down the bottom, they did dominate possession. So it wasn't that they can't do both things. I think he's a little bit of a victim of a split squad. And Ange Postecoglou spoke about this a lot when he was at Spurs. You know, the Conte, Mourinho, all of those players, all of those managers before, right back to Pochettino, they've had this sort of split squad. And there was some incomings in the summer, Xavi Simons, Kudus and Palhinha in particular. But actually what he's left with is a Ange Postecoglou style squad, players who enjoy chaos, if that's the best way to put it. Romero, Porro, Destiny Udogie, Richarlison, they all love chaos. Mickey van der Ven wants it running one way and running the other. And then Frank's trying to put this sort of, pragmatic, slower possession approach into it. And then he's got 2 midfield players in Bentancur and Palhinha who only want to pass it sideways. So the mix of those 2 things is causing a lot of problems.
Yeah, he needs a more disciplined bunch than he's got at the moment, which makes perfect sense. Just quickly then, Dino, the game on the weekend against Crystal Palace, of course, challenging game as that will be. Palace doing very well indeed this season. What's the remedy to what you've just described then against Palace? What should Tottenham do? What solves that problem you've just laid out?
Well, without being in the team room, I don't know if this is true, but one of the things that we're talking about quite a lot is that perhaps Frank is overcomplicating instructions too close to kick-off. They're playing a lot of games, okay? European games, they're out of the League Cup now, FA Cup to come against Aston Villa of all, but then the Premier League, obviously. So it's almost, I think perhaps he's tried to push too much onto a group of players too early. So we know that Palace, Glasner will play in a 3-4-3, and we're obviously missing Xavi Simons here. So through suspension after that rake on Virgil van Dijk the other day, and obviously Romero is missing as well. So through suspension, that will be a straight swap for Kevin Danzo. That's not an issue. And then in here, it probably gives him the opportunity to go back to basics. He was under a lot of pressure pressure to play Xavi Simons when we weren't creating everything and Simons wasn't quite adapted yet.
Right.
But now we can sort of go back to basics against Crystal Palace a little bit. He has to pick a left winger. This is the thing that's infuriating. I was sat a few rows behind the dugout in the Fulham game. The Fulham setup in the match was Bergvall over on this side, as I mentioned, and then Spurs make two horrible mistakes to go 2-0 down in no time. And I don't disagree with the original plan, but then you can see 2 goals early. You have to change the plan before half-time. You can't wait until half-time. And, you know, we're sat in a block of fans all screaming to get either Richarlison or Kolo Muani over on this left-hand side instead of playing this narrow attack. So Mattis Tell, Wilson Odobert, go back to a proper 4-2-3-1. You can play with a base midfield of Sarr and Palhinha or Bentancur and Archie Gray. That's a selection problem. But that is how you should set up. And then here, they really need some energy. So either go for it and go Kolo Muani and Richarlison in attack, or say to Lucas Bergvall, play in the position you want to play in, play Richarlison up the middle. Maybe you play Kolo Muani off the left, but have a structured system so that you're trying to get Kudus 1v1 this side. You're trying to get your left winger, whoever it is, 1v1 this side. And then you're not just hitting hopeful crosses in the box, which is what they've been doing. You've got a second man to go and join the striker and crash the box. And take the complications out of it, go back to it being a more simple approach. And look, as I talk about all the time, they can push Pedro Porro in here and get him right forward. And then they get themselves into that 3-2-5 attacking shape that most teams pick up. Jed Spence in a position where he's most suited, defending. Destiny Udogi's injured, so Jed Spence is a better defender than he is attacker. Get Pedro Porro up in there. I'd almost be tempted to play Kolo Muani as the striker and Richarlison off the left, so at least then it gives you a back post threat for those Kudus crosses that are coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, we'll move on to question number 2, Dean. We'll come back to this a little bit later about personnel, because I think that strikes me as such a sort of an issue at Tottenham, because even as you're saying then, it makes sense, I'll get a left winger on. You mentioned Wilson Odobert and Mattis Tell. Didn't really strike fear into any opponents, really. But let's move on to question number 2 then, Dino. Why isn't it working for Kolo Muani and Xavi Simons in brackets there, Dino?
Yeah, I imagine that, the brackets are probably because of the suspension, and he would have been the topic of conversation if that red card hadn't been given. And what I would say, so as well as those issues that I've highlighted already, to me, it's about speed of play and trust. And there's this sort of attitude that I see from this team, which is like we're in control, but they're pretending they're in control.
While they're 2-0 down.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you know, when Romero will put his foot on the ball, which I absolutely hate, and you know, and he'll be standing there going like this to everyone, while the other team are going, well, this is nice. Yeah. This is good. We'll just sit in front of the ball the whole time. Well, let's quicken it up a little bit. So when Spurs go to play out, let's bring Porro back in. So Romero and Van der Ven go right in here, and they have a left back over there. They have that split shape there, and then they go into that position there, right? I haven't touched the opposition intentionally there for the moment, but that is not a wild strategy. That's
it's not
fine.
An absurd setup,
absolutely.
Is it? No.
But what teams now do against Tottenham, because they know that they won't trust the forward pass, is they don't press. Right. So when the pass goes out from Vicario to one of the 2 centre-backs, this striker doesn't go herring in here, because then you know, we'll play it in here, and then we overload there. They just sit in that shape.
Is that like what we spoke about on Tactics Exposed earlier this week? Monday show, go back and watch it if you haven't already, with Aston Villa against Manchester United. Aston Villa do the thing where they bring their centre-backs right on the goal line. They like to goad people on, and Manchester United went, no, you're all right.
Absolutely.
Don't worry about it.
But teams do that against Spurs. But what the difference with Spurs is here is that because that they should have an extra man, and they should have somebody in here to give the ball to. Because if they're in a 3-4-3 shape with Palace, you'd think, right, well, you've got a pass there, so therefore the left winger will go out, right? So then, okay, well, I've got a pass into my centre midfielder, take it on the half turn. Spurs have got 2 players in here who won't take the ball on the half turn.
Right.
So Palhinha and Bentancur will not take the ball on the half turn. And I'm sorry, as much as I love Pap Sarr as an all-action, running around midfield player, his touch isn't good enough to do that in the Premier League. Archie Gray is, but he's a young boy, got done at Nottingham Forest by coming right back into this area as they play out.
Why are they not doing that? Ability, or it can't be ability?
Yeah, I think it is ability. They're just not. They're not that dynamic a player. Again, you mentioned Aston Villa. They've got 3 players in there who are extremely press resistant. Spurs haven't. Spurs have been left with a midfield that they want to play. So what suits Tottenham is if the ball goes directly up to someone like Kudus or Richarlison, and then this midfield line comes up in support and brings themselves into the game. The problem is they're not being accurate enough because the goalkeeper can't kick it in a straight line. And therefore, then it's becoming a battle up here for Kudus, who's got 2 men on him like this, or Richarlison, who's got 2 men on him like this. So look, opposition teams are going 2v1, 2v1. You can have it in there, lads, and we're still 3 in a line here. So there is a simple solution to this, and this is where, to go back to this question, I feel really sorry for these 2 players. Look, they've not set the world alight. They are not completely blameless in all this. But let's just say for a second that these 2 players are Xavi Simons and Kolo Muani in the way that they play. The way that Spurs should then manipulate this is these 2 won't press, okay? So, okay, go on there and go on there. Immediately, you've got that pass there and that pass there. And Xavi Simons, dozens and dozens of times in the games that I've watched over the last 5 to 6 weeks, goes in there and he's going, give me the ball, and they don't play it. Right. They will not play that pass.
Why?
And so they just don't trust themselves to do it, or they've been told by Thomas Frank, don't play that ball because it's too risky because you might get cut out here. But if they don't play the ball, all they do is recycle possession around these areas, and then, again, that team will drop back into a shape. You know, the number 10 goes back in, they come in very compact, and then Spurs will edge their way up to the halfway line with Romero and Van der Ven knocking it back and forth between themselves. And then, this is Crystal Palace, but all the other teams that have done it, Fulham especially at the Tottenham Stadium the other week, were just going, blimey, this is easy.
Yeah, can we tackle you at all? Yeah.
Absolutely. And then what it then turns into is, can Kudus beat his man? Can whoever's on the left beat his man? Or can Richarlison, to be fair to him, scrap his way to a scrappy corner win, which then Spurs are a big threat from corners and long throws. So it isn't working for these 2 guys because Spurs aren't being accurate enough, fast enough and direct enough. These are 2 international forwards. We've got one who played in a World Cup final, which he might want to try and forget for the chance he missed. But we've got a guy who scored in the semi-final of the Euros against England playing as a number 10 for the Netherlands. You know, it's not ability. This is a tactical setup that isn't working. So if Frank is going to play with a 2-man at the base, he's got to free the fullbacks in order to let it become a front 3 with Simons, Kudus and another, free those fullbacks forward and then allow players to push right on so that at least you're stretching a midfield so you can start to play into their feet. At the moment, midfields and attacks, when they're in their rest defence against Tottenham, aren't stretched.
Yeah, absolutely. It is really bizarre to me though, Dino, because obviously Mohammed Kudus, the African Lionel Messi, he was dubbed by all the Tottenham fans as soon as you nicked him off West Ham for 55 million quid. Really puzzling.
Have
right.
you seen question 3?
I haven't actually. Let's move on to question 3. There we go.
Did you write
Excellent.
this?
Yeah. But brackets Will Pugh at the bottom. Is Mohammed Kudus the class act of the first few weeks or just a show pony? Now, there's not often on Tactics Exposed, Dino, I feel better placed to answer these questions than you. But I can tell you the answer to this, and I've been telling you it for actually about a year before he moved to Tottenham anyway.
Well, go on then, you go first.
Well, I think Mohammed Kudus is exactly that. I think he's a show pony. When the going gets tough, he gets going rather than, but not gets going, he gets going missing, is what I normally find. He's a YouTube player. He's got flashes. You'll see a couple of excellent clips, great at dribbling with the ball. I think his decision-making's poor. And it's more that, I think, the mentality thing. Some days he'd be West Ham's best player. But then for long periods of time, nowhere to be seen. One of the highest earners, as he will be at Tottenham as well. I think it's as much a mentality thing as anything. And now it's going tough at Tottenham. I haven't heard from any of your fans giving me these ones about
the first few weeks. I think, and the first few weeks. And I asked you about him when we signed. Obviously, I'd seen him play against us, saw him get sent off against us, and seen all those clips that you talk about. And in the first few weeks he was there, it was like, what are you on about? This guy is the real deal. Yeah. And you know, and look, he's had a more difficult few weeks. But what I liked about him in the first few weeks was against PSG in that Super Cup game, he played like a second striker. Yeah. And I've never seen a non-striker hold the ball up as well as he does. His strength to hold a player off is amazing. So that tells me he can take the ball under pressure in pressurised situations.
Definitely.
But this goes back to, I think, is look, I think both of those are true, if that's fair. It's just which of those turns up on a particular day.
That's why I think it's a mentality thing. If I'm honest, I really think it is, because I've got no doubt. That's why you paid 55 million, because you're hoping you get Kudus on his day more often than not. But there's so much of the other side in him, and that's what you're seeing now.
Absolutely, and I really like Rodrigo Bentancur. I've liked him since he came to Spurs. I'm a big fan of João Palhinha as a defensive midfield player, but you cannot play both of them in the same team, and this is having an impact on Kudus, right? Because what's happening here, let's drop Palace into a back five, as they will be, and a lot of teams, obviously, whether they play 4 at the back, 3 at the back, end up in a back 5 anyway. So Kudus would be over on this side. We'll leave the striker and the 10 relatively close together, and then we'll just drop the team into like a defensive shape that they would end up in, okay? So straight away, Spurs have got too many players here. That's a big problem straight away, because Jed Spencer's a right footer playing on the left, but let's say it was Destiny Udogie, who's injured at the moment, then your winger here would be able to move in and Udogie would go up here, okay? Then in this position, you do not need 2 midfielders in to be deep. So you get, let's switch them into a position like that, where you can say you've got one helping your fullbacks to protect, and then the other can go and roam. So what Tottenham end up doing is playing into these areas here. You get Kudus in this position so many times. You watch it and it's all the time. And so sometimes he'll beat his man up this side and get a reasonable cross in. He's had assists for Richarlison. I think he's top of goal involvements for Spurs this season, along with Richarlison, but given the little number of goals we scored, that's not really saying very much. But what they're not doing, Spurs, is helping him in this area. So if he gets 1v1 here and he thinks there's no space to go up the line, right? Pedro Porro is quite good at this. He'll go up the inside here, which hopefully takes this player away, makes him shunt back a bit, and then you've got the cut back for the left foot cross. Okay?
Or the space to drive into the box.
Absolutely, and to have a shot, which he does do on occasion. But sometimes defences will get themselves in such a good position that you end up with that. And so Porro's going to think, OK, well, I can't really underlap or overlap here because I'm just going to take all of this space here away. And so that's where this player is so important, because he has to come in and manipulate something in this area. That means that either Kudus plays it back to him and gets it bounced back in, so he's running into these spaces in behind, or he drives into this space here so that then Kudus can lay it back to Porro, who is a fabulous deliverer of the ball, to then put the ball into the box. And then if all of a sudden we were saying, oh, hang on a minute, Kudus is attracting 3 players, Porro hits a great cross in and Richarlison maybe heads it over, but, you know, you get into that position where at least you're thinking you're making something happen and he's part of it. But again, I said this right at the start of this description, what's happening is, because Jed Spence is not that attacking player, because they're not playing with a left winger, what the opposition team are doing is just going, right, OK, move across one, move across one, move across one. They're all just going across. And then look at that. You know, and I'm sorry, but you mentioned Messi there, but even Lionel Messi might struggle against a defence that's in that position, because Tottenham have no attack down the other side. They're completely reliant on one guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Even the very, very best wingers always perform better when there's another very decent winger on the other side. Right? I think Ian Robben, all the success he had at Chelsea, Damien Duff on the other side, like extremely threatening.
Yeah, absolutely. Double attacks, and as a defence, you can't shuffle over. And that goes back to my point about Bergvall in the Fulham game, where we were just going, just get a left midfielder on. Get somebody on this side so that when one of the 2 midfield players has got the ball in here, you're thinking, well, which way are they going to go? Are they going to go in here? Which means, oh, look, we've got a problem. We've got to shift across. You know, oh, look, then we've got another pass over here that's open instead. So it's just one-dimensional from Spurs, predictable. And because the midfield players don't shift the ball fast enough, by the time the ball gets to these attacking players, the quality of Kudus, Muani, Simons, they have 2-3 players around them, and then the crowd gets on their back because then they pass it backwards and they reset. So, yeah, it's just the same thing over and over and over again.
Sorry, Dean, I'm trying to mask how much I'm enjoying this episode. Just quickly then, Dina, very, very briefly, if it's not working out for Kudus, what's the change that Thomas Frank can make?
Yeah, well, I think that the change is in midfield because he has to, look, Palace have got injury problems and suspension issues. Spurs have got a suspension issues as well. But they've got Kevin Danzo here in this game instead of Christian Romero. And so he's not as good on the ball as Romero is. So that is another problem. So perhaps what we might see is Pedro Porro actually play a lot deeper and then him say to Jed Spence, which he has done in previous games, Spence, go and play as that inverted fullback, Calafiori style, which almost gets into an inverted 10, which then you do get that 3-2-5 shape again, which I prefer. And then if you have a midfielder here, right, you need one to go out. So then all of a sudden, Kudus could get to be man v man and 1v1. And in that scenario, play the ball into Richarlison, get it closer to Muani. And at the moment, the only time Spurs look like scoring is from crosses. So they have to find a way to get Kudus in space so that he can cross it.
Absolutely. Well, look, if it's not working out for Mohammed Kudus and you've backed him to score, do not worry, because with Betfair's Safe Sub, your bet is not over yet if your player gets subbed off, because it rolls on to the player coming on. So like I say, if you've backed Kudus to score at any time, he hasn't, he gets hauled off, Mattis Tell comes on instead and he curls one into the top corner against Palace, will you still get paid out? So happy days. Dino, not loads on the actual game against Crystal Palace. I think it's one of those times for your club, as happens to lots of teams, to be fair, when the macro situation is a bit more important than the situation right in front of you or than the very next game. So long story short then, what does it need? Can Thomas Frank turn it round? Will he turn it round against Palace? And what does the future hold? What do you think?
Yeah, he can turn it around against Palace. He's a very nice man. He's a very, very good coach. It's just a very different job at Tottenham Hotspur to what it was at Brentford. I don't think I'm offending anybody at Brentford to say that. Off the back of a Europa League victory, with a squad in transition, they went through a mode for 12 to 18 months of just buying very talented teenagers. And that surely didn't have enough. They didn't have enough experience in the squad when all those injuries happened last year. And then they've added a couple of players, but they've added a Mohammed Kudus where the Brian and Burmo position would have been at Brentford. And then they went for the likes of Eze and Morgan Gibbs-White, didn't get them. And to be fair, the likes of Archie Gray, teenager, Lucas Bergvall, teenager, Mattis Tell, I think just not a teenager, and Odebear the same. They're not of that level. So yes, he can turn it around, but I don't know whether I should be saying this or not, but Glasner was my pick before Thomas Frank, and I'd still pick Glasner.
Yeah, well, Crystal Palace fans, if you're watching this, very sorry to hear that. Yeah, I think, to me, Dino, it screams, like Brentford or Brighton, I say the same thing. It screams Graham Potter to Chelsea. I think we may see over the next few seasons, whether it's at Tottenham or elsewhere, Thomas Frank getting a little bit found out and then cut to Keith Andrews being named Tottenham manager in about 5 years'
his set-piece coach is outdoing him at the moment, isn't he?
Exactly. Look, thanks very much for watching, everyone. Merry Christmas as well to all of you from me and from Dino. Happy New Year. Thanks for all your support over 2025. It's been an absolute screamer. We've loved doing the show. We've loved having you along for the ride. Let us know what you think of this episode in particular in the comments. What's wrong at Tottenham? Is it too late for Thomas Frank? In your opinion, what's up? Stick with us, because we'll be with you over the festive break and on into 2026. Bigger and better, hopefully, on Tactics Exposed Team Talk. See you then.